Hey guys, this is a different type of video from what I usually post. So, this is a response video to A Shield for Men's response to my video about genital mutilation. I will link my original video and his, so please watch both of them to get the full scope of the arguments being made here. A Shield for Men suggests that I was favoring female genital mutilation over male genital mutilation in my video at the expense of male victims of male genital mutilation. However, we had a back and forth in the comments before he made his response video where I clarified my statements. Even so, he still put up his response. Firstly, most, if not all, my videos are rants by design. I source when and where I see fit. However, that's not usually the point of my videos. If ever there's a case where anyone requires clarification on any one of my stances from here onward, I would ideally prefer to resolve it in the comments. However, I felt I needed to make this video response more extensive so as to definitively show why I still say FGM is degrees of magnitude worse than FGM on certain physiological bases. In any case, it's important to understand that I agree with A Shield for Men's stances on male genital mutilation, and he also agrees that female genital mutilation and male genital mutilation are abhorrent practices. So we are in agreement that genital mutilation of any kind is a horrid practice. Where I think we diverge and where I clarified in my comments is what exactly I meant by worse. So, as I said towards the end of the original comment thread, my claim is FGM has worse tangible outcomes, higher incidences of physiological comorbidities, that is, than male genital mutilation. However, both practices are still abhorrent in their rationale and their intent. Basically, the reason why both of them are carried out is still abhorrent, and any justifications to that effect are abhorrent. This will be my position from here moving forward. I should also say that as far as response videos go, this is a very well-sourced one, and you have good intentions with it. I've come to expect very little from online discourse, but thank you for the effort you've put into your video. I agree with the findings that you've stated, by the way. And I just wanted to highlight some of the parts of your video that I really agreed with. At 48 minutes and 59 seconds, you say there's a study you talk about that males who undergo genital mutilations still have quite a number of negative outcomes, even in a Western medical standard. And then at 59 minutes and 41 seconds, you bring up a list of botched circumcisions. And then at 1 hour, 1 minute and 26 seconds, you bring up a study showing that lists 47 complications of male genital mutilation. So I particularly agreed with those 3 points. With all that out of the way, let me begin by discussing certain points you made with timestamps available for reference, starting with the most pressing one, where you said, I don't hold the two evils of female and male genital mutilation on an equal level, which is the general sentiment conveyed in the section 1 of the timestamps that I listed. So I believe it's important to delineate value judgments from material observation, even though modern discourse frustratingly conflates the two. My personal stance is genital mutilation of male, female, intersex, children, and/or adults, as observed throughout human cultures past and present, are abhorrent and are all morally despicable in both their rationale and their intent. That is my value judgment, and it should be the same for any compassionate human being. In this case, FGM and MGM bring net zero or even negative benefits, negative outcomes for people subjected to it. And in fact, whether male, female, or intersex, all victims experience horrible physiological, psychological, and emotional outcomes from the practice. However, in terms of risk factors, FGM does outweigh MGM for two very obvious reasons you neglected to cover. This is a material observation. You can admit these facts, while also believing that genital mutilation performed on any gender, age group, etc. is all morally equal in their destructive effects on its victims. Let me illustrate my point. Children receive the most casualties from car accidents compared to adults in the same car. Why is this? Simply, their bodies are not fully developed. This Forbes article got the opinion of a auto club something. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the guy is, but he says children are far more susceptible to injuries in car crashes than adults because their little bodies have not fully developed. Now, this is a material observation. However, if a family had a car accident and the parent did not receive as many injuries as the child, I would not sympathize with the child more than the parent. They are both injured and traumatized, and both require and deserve my concern and attention. This is a value judgment. I hope from here on out that I have made this clear, because A Shield for Men reiterates his assertion that I consider FGM worse than male genital mutilation, and he is of the position that they are the same in terms of physiological and psychological outcomes, which I agree with up to a certain point. Now, for some scientific jargon. When assessing the tangible outcomes of a particular phenomena, in this case genital mutilation, a person must take into account the variables involved amongst the subjects of the assessment. In this case, we want to understand the effects of genital mutilations among humans delineated by age, sex, gender differences, and so on. So in this case, the incidence rate of genital mutilation is an example of an independent variable. An independent variable is a variable that stands alone and isn't changed by the other variables you are trying to measure. It, in a sense, is the cause. Its value is independent of other variables in your study. A dependent variable is the effect. The main dependent variables in this case would be the rate of gender-specific comorbidities experienced by the genital mutilation victims and the negative physiological outcomes of said genital mutilations. Also, a confounding variable is an unmeasured third variable that influences both the supposed cause and the supposed effect. And finally, a comorbidity is the existence of more than one disease or condition within your body at the same time. I just needed to explain these few terms because when I am discussing about worse, what is meant by worse in this discussion, I think is almost irrelevant, because it it is not a concrete word. It's a very uh, it's a very non-descriptive value judgment, and hence it can mean really anything. And I think that's where the point of confusion comes from. So now that I've explained all that, I think A Shield for Men assumes my moral and material arguments both state more resistance to FGM than to MGM, which is just a matter of misinterpretation. But more so, his sentiments as to why FGM is more strongly opposed to MGM is a matter of entrenched, confounding variables that affect the perceptions of both types of mutilation, as well as the added comorbidities faced by the victims. So now I want to respond to the quotes in the section 2 that I've listed. I just wanted to, before I do that, I wanted to answer a few questions you left on the comments, and the same kind of sentiment is paraphrased throughout your videos, so I thought it'd be easier to answer it that way. So you quoted me, and then you asked, can you show me evidence of outcome that is worse with FGM than outcomes of FGM? The NHS article you cited had very similar outcomes of FGM with MGM. So given that I've explained the difference between independent, dependent, confounding variables and comorbidities, I still stand by what I said here initially. And it was included in the very same NHS article that I cited, yet even after going through it, in your response, you did not acknowledge the arguments I brought up. Though maybe your video was mostly done by then, so it's fine. This part of the NHS article is what you looked over, where it says problems during labor and childbirth, which can be life-threatening for mother and baby. Pregnancy, labor, and childbirth, or PLC as I'll call them from here onwards, are factors which are physiologically only experienced by females. PLC is the most dangerous physiological process that a human can undergo, or in the case of the fetus, become subjected to. Males do not have this issue, obviously. Both males and females experience sexual dysfunction as a result of genital mutilation. This is true. However, females who become pregnant while also dealing with chronic infection risks of genital mutilation now have to contend with possible risks to the developing fetus. The labor process, which is highly dangerous even to females who have not undergone genital mutilation, is even more exacerbated by genital mutilation, increasing the maternal mortality rate as a result. But let me quote this study to better elaborate on why I say this. The extent to which women with FGM will encounter complications during pregnancy and labor, as well as the postpartum period after birth, depends greatly on the context. In resource-poor settings where knowledge and access to appropriate antenatal care is often compromised, there is a greater number of complications. A study of 28,000 women with female genital mutilation across 6 African countries found that FGM increased the risk of prolonged labor, postpartum hemorrhage, perineal trauma, and cesarean section. In addition, there was an increased risk of neonatal resuscitation, low birth rate, stillbirth, and early neonatal death, with FGM thought to lead to an extra 1 to 2 perinatal deaths per 100 deliveries. Yet, even in a resource-rich setting, the risk of complications is increased. A large systematic review from 2013 involving almost 3 million participants, including studies from USA and Europe. Studies were in general of poor quality, but meta-analyses showed that women who have undergone FGM suffer more frequently from prolonged difficult labor, have a higher rate of obstetric lacerations, more often require instrumental delivery, and have increased rates of obstetric hemorrhage. I think that part explains why immediately it is worse. It I'm trying not to use the word worse because, like I said, it is a loaded word. There are more harmful outcomes for females who undergo this simply by a matter of their biology that they were born with, right? This is material, this is tangible, right? And we can observe this to be true while still holding that both practices are abhorrent. Then, in another one of your comments, you said that I just assumed that pregnancy is the reason why FGM is more opposed than MGM. I don't have to assume this. It's just true. This is a demonstrably material observation from a risk associated with genital mutilation for females that males do not experience. Even though this is cited as a reason for the preferential value judgment of FGM to MGM that we observe in the media, it is not a valid reason for diminishing the value of victims of male genital mutilation. This is why I agreed with all your findings on male genital mutilation, even females experience similar comorbidities, especially with neonatal genital mutilation. Also, at 37 minutes and 25 seconds of your video, I already highlighted how our genitals are the most sensitive part of our bodies. I just didn't go into full detail as I was ranting about it. And then you also asked, or said, you have not demonstrated that the menstruation cycle complications are worse than complications or outcomes which include brain damage and sudden infant death syndrome. Both is life endangering. So I don't have to demonstrate this because you seem to conflate all physiological processes as a zero-sum game, which they are not, especially with regards to menstruation. Menstruation is a variable in which males are excluded from, a variable which exacerbates the negative outcomes of genital mutilation. This United Nations Population Fund, FAQ, goes into more detail. In the section where it says, how does FGM affect the health of women and girls? The bottom paragraph says, infibulation or type 3 FGM may cause complete vaginal obstruction, resulting in the accumulation of menstrual flow in the vagina and uterus. Infibulation creates a physical barrier to sexual intercourse and childbirth. An infibulated woman therefore has to undergo gradual dilation of the vaginal opening before sexual intercourse can take place. As a result, there are no male biological processes that are analogous, comparable to female menstruation or PLC, which was my main point. As to why I reacted more negatively to FGM than MGM, it's the result of my emotions reacting to what my collective material findings have observed. And knowing that females subjected to genital mutilation will also deal with the physiological as well as social stigma issues of menstruation and PLC creates a visceral sense of anger as a result, which personally does not conflict with my hatred of MGM. As I already stated, both practices are equally evil and abhorrent, and both should end as soon as possible. And the point you brought up about how male foreskins are used in skincare ignites the same sense of anger for the same reasons as said before. In a way, I could also ask you why your channel is not a shield for humanity but is instead called a shield for men. But I think you get my point. I did find it quite laughable the accusation of an anti-male bias, especially after I clarified my position, but that's besides the point. So you brought up a study saying that women who live in Egypt approve of FGM more than men. While the findings are true, it's not the whole picture. I do think it may support your claim of sexual impulse control as similar with MGM, but the role of patriarchal beliefs cannot be understated. Let me open this one study that says here in its discussion, it says the evaluation of rural, it was a study done in Egypt as well. The evaluation of rural residents' knowledge on FGM related complications showed that 57.9% of females knew that the practice was badly affected girls' health and welfare. Similar findings were reported by Moges and his cohort in a study conducted to assess knowledge of women towards FGM in Ethiopia. About 55% of rural residents had knowledge that female genital mutilation was against the law, which was similar to that of Imam Ayal, who noticed that despite women's awareness that FGM was illegal, they would still practice it. This showed that the law alone was not sufficient enough to eradicate this habit, and it seemed that laws forbidding FGM led to changes in the pattern of the practice. So there's that, and then there's also this Ref World study, and in the first, the first page, it says, why does FGM happen? So FGM has been performed in Egypt since pharaonic times and is practiced for several reasons. Most commonly cited are tradition, religion, and its association with marriage. 57.5% of men and 53% of women believe a husband prefers his wife to be cut. Important to Egyptian men also is the concept of kuama, protection, and men view female genital mutilation as part of protecting the women in their families. However, it has been noted by some that the most problematic reason for female genital mutilation is the pervasive idea that women are oversexed and that the practice reduces their sexual appetites. 48.7% of men and 43.1% of women believe FGM prevents adultery. That's why I agreed with you when you said circumcision has that element of mate guarding and sexual impulse restriction, really. The same kind of psychology also probably exists for FGM. Not probably, I mean, it really does there. It says it right there. So to answer section 3 now, the practice continues for evolutionary reasons and sociocultural reasons. As to why FGM is put on a pedestal, it's a nefarious campaign to undermine male suffrage, which has been going on for centuries. Society never gave a fuck about 99% of men before, and it definitely doesn't now. The only ones that mattered were the landowners, and then subsequently the bank owners after them. Lower to lower middle class men have been fighting against these kinds of tyrannical despots for thousands of years before feminists grew the nerve to rewrite history as they saw fit. But simply put, I think there's too much money to be made from the male genital mutilation industry as to why it is not covered in the same way. Foreskins are used in skincare and stem cell harvesting. I really don't know if the same type of industry exists with regards to clitoris, I don't know, or sliced off labia. And if it did, it's definitely not to the extent of the foreskin market. In any case, among many other topics, the topic of genital mutilation is what led me to justify my antinatalist position. After what you've mentioned and after what I've presented, it's even clearer now that this world is not a place meant for children. I hope I've clarified my positions enough from here onwards. And guys, please watch A Shield for Men's video. I'm sure afterwards you'll be better equipped to oppose genital mutilation of any kind in the future. Thanks for watching. By the way, before I forget, at 1 hour, 10 minutes and 20 seconds, you bring up tweets by Michael Shermer, a supposed skeptic. And let me tell you that this has to be one of the stupidest things I've ever seen another human being actively say, right? I was like, not morally equivalent. And you see, the thing is, people who proclaim skepticism are like the worst kinds to me. How the fuck can he say not morally equivalent? One cause at a time. This is an absolute... Michael Shermer is a clown. This guy is a fucking clown. And anyone who thinks like him is a bigger clown than him. I just had to get that out.